Hello and welcome to the NYU Game Center lecture series. We have a really exciting talk for you tonight. I'm very excited to have Jim and Emily Greer talking about Kongragate and their various paths through the game industry. I believe this is the greatest brother and sister video game team of all time that we have talking tonight. So I'm really excited to hear them talk about their path through the industry, the challenges they faced, their introduction of sort of a groundbreaking video game platform in Kongregate, and their other efforts in games. They're also doing some really interesting stuff in the game industry right now. Before we get into that, though, I want to thank our sponsors for our lecture series. We have Fresh Planet, Take-Two Interactive, Empire State Development, and Parsec, who are just really instrumental in giving us the funds and the resources to make this lecture series happen. So we're going to have a really exciting talk tonight. I'm really excited to introduce them. I'm tired of saying the word excited. You're tired of hearing me say it. So I'm going to bring in, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our speakers tonight. I believe this is our first duo doing a lecture series talk since we've gone remote for that. So that's exciting as well. So please help join me in welcoming Jim and Emily Greer.
Hello, and this is now the time when I share a screen, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, there we go. Okay, cool. Yeah, this is also the first time that Jim and I have ever done a public talk together. We've both done a fair amount of conference speaking, but we've never done it before. And also the first time we've done it remotely, and definitely the first time I've done it when my brother dressed up like he's Bjorn Borg or another 1980s tennis player. So it's a lot of different firsts. To start off with, this is a very short and very biased history of Kongragate. It's a little bit about how we think about Kongragate, but it's also the things we hopefully think you will find interesting. But anything that goes on for more than 10 years is a complicated story. But ours starts with, let's see, it starts with us because Kongragate was started by me and Jim. And we're siblings. We are not husband and wife, as we frequently have had to tell other people that we're not. We're probably one of the few brother and sister teams in games. I think certainly the ones that we know about. And we grew up moving around a lot. We lived in Texas and then in Spain and then Texas and then Spain and then New Jersey. And I think that made us sort of closer than average siblings. And we played games together quite a lot. And that's a lot of the origin of Kongragate. One of the sort of stories that we like to tell is back when I think I was about 8 and Jim was 11. We were on a family trip to Ireland, and Jim tended to run through his allowance pretty quickly on D&D figures and arcades and comic books and other things. And I was much more of a saver. So he really, 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 really wanted a copy of Ultima 3 to play on our Apple II that our mother had bought to write her PhD on. And he didn't have enough money. So he spent most of this family trip to Ireland with me trapped in the back seat with him, convincing me that Ultima 3 was going to be the best game ever made and that we absolutely needed to play it. And could we go halvesies? And that was his first experience pitching and getting an investor. And that was my first time being convinced by Jim that some game and some idea was going to be great. And he was right. Ultima 3 was a really great game. I think it was the game of all time at that time. And it led to other things. One of the places we lived was Austin, Texas, which is where Origin was. And Jim, at one point, went on to get a summer internship on Ultima 7 and then dropped out of college to help finish it. So, but he can tell you more about that.
Cool. And if I'm seeing it right, I think you're still on the first slide and not in presenter mode.
Oh, I'm not in presenter mode?
Yeah, and I still see the first slide on the Zoom.
Okay. That's weird. Let me try again. Okay. Oh, I think I know what happened. I have two of these open. Is this better?
Yep. So there's our cute pictures of us. There's the excellent Ultimas. And yeah, so hello, everybody. I'm actually not that great a tennis player. I just like the look. You can call it Bjorn Borg. You can call it Luke Wilson from the Royal Tenenbaums. But what it really is COVID hair that I need to keep out of my eyes. So I conned Emily into buying a game for me. And then I conned Richard Garriott into hiring me to work on Ultima 7 when I was 20. Everybody on the game got their portrait in the game, all the 256 characters, so everybody worked on it. So that little cyclops in the bottom right is what I looked like when I was 21, except I had two eyes. So I had a great experience working very hard on a game that shipped on 7 floppy disks. And then I went on to start along with some fellow Origin alumni, the propitiously named Titanic Entertainment in Austin. There were 8 of us, and we made a game called Netstorm Islands at War, which was a real-time strategy puzzle hybrid, all network game in 1997, made to play up over a dial-up modem. And it was published by Activision and was voted years later by CNET to be the #1 game of all time that nobody bought. So learned a lot. We were sort of indie developers in the age before indie developers. The internet was there, but the only way to distribute your game on the internet was like shareware, and only Doom had ever done that. So we were actually on a CD at Best Buy, published by Activision. And it meant if Activision funded the game, and therefore they owned the copyright. And we really wanted to make a sequel because we'd figured out what we did right and wrong, but we couldn't. They didn't want to do it. So that was it. We were shit out of luck. So that kind of left me with kind of an understanding of what it means to be a game developer and try to own your own intellectual property and fund it. So anyway, that we'll come back to that. But my journey from there was to work at Electronic Arts on a site called pogo.com, which I think still sort of exists. And it was casual social games before Facebook existed. So it's and it was an interesting kind of social game. So if you look at the interface there, it's the game on the left, the channel on the right, kind of like Kongragate, kind of like Twitch. But it was people playing simple puzzle games. I think we had 8 different versions of Solitaire and Bingo, and people paid a subscription fee for more games and for to have avatars and achievements and so forth. And it was like a $125 million business. So it was really interesting, mostly female, and kind of a preview, and I think a more social version than social games, which, a lot of social games just uses social to trick you into making your friends play. But this was real sociability. People made friends, they got married and all that. So learned a lot. And then left EA to start Kongragate. And we ended up getting before that, when we were deciding to leave EA, me and some friends were thinking of different ideas. Kyle Gabler worked there at that time, he and Ron Carmel and my friend Ben Vincent, who went on to make the Leroy Jenkins video, and me sort of experimented with an idea that Kyle had, a very simple game that he had created that it was called Tower of Goo. And it was just a simple build tower of goo balls. And we're like, well, what if we had made levels for it? And that turned into World of Goo. But I decided I wanted to do Kongragate and not World of Goo. So we all ended up getting an office together. Not even an office. We worked at an apartment in the Lower Haight. And so it was pretty cool that the same living room birthed both Kongragate and World of Goo. But anyway, so that was in that era. There was a whole world of games that you could play on the internet, but internet distribution still really sucked. In 2000, we're talking about 2005, 2006, so there were no app stores. Steam barely existed, but only distributed Valve games. There was no digital console distribution, so it still really sucked to be an indie developer. And so the idea of Kongragate was to take another thing. YouTube was just growing then, so the idea of anybody being able to put up their own game and a community, discovering it, and then that same community being able to earn those Xbox Live Pogo style achievements and points and levels and all that good stuff. We call them badges. And then most importantly, really simple developer friendly terms. So initially our revenue was all from ads. And so we shared ad revenue with the developers on a very simple, like, here's how much revenue your game brings in, here's the proportion you get. And that was new at the time. So that was sort of the combo. And so the next hurdle was finding a co-founder. I actually founded the company on my own, and then about 3 weeks later, Emily, you want to take it from here?
Yeah, because Jim wasn't looking for a co-founder, and actually you had one thing in between you and starting Kongragate, which is that you had only a few months before that moved in with your girlfriend, who is now your wife, and in the same house. And she was like, supportive, but also worried about you quitting your job. So she said, you can quit your job, but you should talk to Emily first and see if she thinks it's a good idea, because she knows you really well. And she says, yes, and you've also got my yes, so you can go quit your job today. So at that point, I had taken a very different path. I was not in games at all. Jim and I played games together as long as we had a shared computer and a shared household. But then I went off to college, I had my own computer, and I stopped, playing games nearly as much. I had Bejeweled on my flip phone, but got farther away. I was an exchange student in Hungary and learned Hungarian and majored in Russian and Eastern European studies, which prepared me for absolutely nothing. And I left college and said, I like books, and went into book publishing, and then quickly discovered that I didn't like choosing books for other people, that I found that very stressful. I realized I like to have like more grounded reasons for making decisions than just like, I like it or I don't like it. And I think you will too. But the company that I worked for was a book club company, and they were doing A/B tests and other things. And I was like, ooh, I really like that. And I gravitated towards that and ended up in a career in direct marketing and catalogs and e-commerce, essentially doing what we would now call data science and UA. Like, I self-taught SQL and built statistical models and other things that college had not prepared me for, but I just was really interested in. So that's what I was doing. I'd gotten kind of bored with that. I almost went to grad school in econ and then decided not to, in part because I would have had to leave the Bay Area, which I didn't want to. So this is where I was at on like 8 a.m. on a Tuesday morning when Jim called me on my way to work. I can remember it. I was in the Civic Center Muni station for some reason. And I answered Jim's call, and he told me, like, because he'd been about to move to a studio, but now he wanted to congregate, and it was all about the distribution, et cetera. And I was like, you know what? This sounds like a good idea. I think Daphne had wanted him to talk to me because I was like the person in his life who was most likely to tell him that something was a bad idea. We have a long sort of sibling relationship in which Jim got me to do things that I wouldn't otherwise do. And I stopped Jim from doing stuff that was particularly like a bad idea, which is actually a really complimentary relationship in both siblings and co-founders. So I was like, nope, I think that's a good idea. You should go do that. And I heard from him 2 hours later that he'd put in his notice from EA and been escorted from the building because he was doing something competitive. So it started happening really quickly. And we were, I didn't have any background in games, but I had a lot of background in sort of finance and marketing and figuring out and building websites. And so I started helping Jim with his business plan. And I was feeling really jealous. I was like, this just seems like so much more interesting and fun. And I don't know how I could be useful, but I'm good at telling Jim when something's a bad idea. And I can do spreadsheets. And Jim, do you want a co-founder? And Jim said yes. And that was how we got to be co-founders.
I enthusiastically said yes, if I recall.
Yeah. And then our father decided to invest more because both of his children were investing. And that's a little bit a part of the story of Kongragate. We were in a good place to, take some time without salary. I had just gotten sort of a windfall of options from a catalog company I'd been working with. Jim, you had gotten the EA spouse settlement, I think. And so we were in a sort of financially, you didn't yet have kids. We were in a financially secure place to take that leap. And I went into it thinking, well, I don't think it'll work, but it'll be an adventure and I'll learn a lot. And the worst that happens is that I'll go back to doing what I was doing before. But it did work out. The first thing we did was run an office that was halfway between me and Jim's apartments, and Kyle shared it with us, and he was sleeping in the back, but totally nocturnal. And we had the office in the front that we quickly filled, and it was just actually a really kind of fun and amazing time trying to figure everything out all at once.
Cool. And at the same time, while Kongragate was a new idea, the idea of having a browser game site was a very common idea. So there was addicting games and Miniclip and Armor Games and Newgrounds, and Newgrounds being the one that I have by far the most admiration and respect for. And while those were good sites for, just they had the games, they weren't great in a couple of ways. One is that they didn't really add much besides just having a bunch of games on them. They didn't really foster community. You couldn't meet people. You could. They did foster community a little bit, but it was not very accessible. And none of them paid the game developers or Newgrounds also had a lot of videos and nobody got paid. So we decided to go out. A lot of sites were also just stealing games off of other sites. It was kind of not the most savory world. And we said, okay, well, the way to how are we going to start? Because the way you get an audience is by having games, and who's going to want to put games on your site if you don't have an audience? And what do the developers want? Well, the developers want an audience. They want money. They want feedback. And this is actually a big deal, especially if you look at sort of the, early stage kind of, pre-professional developers. They just want to feel like, hey, people are playing my game and they like it or they don't like it and they're telling me why. And so we wanted to make it really easy to do that. And then to have status. So, right, you could say, oh man, I've got the top rated game that came out this week. I feel awesome about that, right? And what do players want? Well, they want games. They want, in many cases, not all, some of them just want games, but others want to sort of, earn like they're making progress and leveling up and there's some broader story there. And many of them want connection to other people. They want to be part of a community. And, all gamers want status. So they want to say, oh, here's my high score. I earned the Impossible badge, etc. So we, the first thing we had to do was to pound the pavement and get games. And we thought, this is going to be really hard. But within 2 weeks, 30 developers had put games on our site because they're like, oh, this looks cool. Why not? So then we had to raise some money because we didn't think that we were going to just be able to bootstrap this into being a profitable business. And luckily our timing was pretty good. So we pitched Kongragate. It's like YouTube for games. It's like, oh, YouTube had just sold for $2.5 billion, 1 point, whatever it was, seemed like a lot of money then. Still a lot of money, but not compared to what you see now. So like YouTube plus X was a good pitch. Electronic Arts was a known name, and we had some traction. By the time we raised money, we actually already had a private alpha of the site up with a couple hundred games or something like that. So we raised some money. Reid Hoffman, who's the founder of LinkedIn, and invested money, and then Greylock, which is a pretty, they invested in Facebook, they invested, and then later on, Jeff Bezos put some money in as well. So we had enough money, and we were off and running. And Emily, you can tell people about what happened next.
Yeah, and one thing I may talk about a little bit in the Q&A is that we actually had a really pretty smooth time, as Jim said, raising money. But it was not personally very smooth for me. I didn't really believe in sectism until the experience of raising money for Kongragate, which sort of really changed my perspective on that. But the thing is Jim was a great pitchman. And as you can see from this chart, we were gaining games and then gaining visitors and gaining games and gaining visitors, and just kind of in this sort of positive trajectory. These numbers are through 2008. Eventually, the peak.
You're still on the. Oh, sorry, you're on the.
Yeah, the peak was around like I think our peak traffic was something like 18 million monthly unique visitors on browser. So it was still just the beginning of a pretty big rise. So one of the things that made that possible and made it possible for us to really take off was the community. So Jim had the vision, seeing people playing on Pogo and really obsessively collecting badges and chatting and feeling the progression, that was really meaningful and important. And it turned out in Flash games, it was also really important. We had built out a lot of things, a level progression, badges, form posts, all of that. And all of that made a really big difference in our stickiness. All of those other sites, those Flash game sites, if you looked at sort of the ComScore metrics, we always had much longer site visit times, visits per visitor. Every kind of retention metric we had was higher. And it was because of all of these community-based and community-driven and achievement-oriented things. So average player earned 34 achievements. And our achievements were actually pretty hard to earn, especially the impossible badges. And we would see, that different retention rate. People who chatted were always had much higher retention than people that didn't. So that was what really drove us. I used to say that we didn't have viral growth. We had sort of Katamari growth. Like we would pick up people and just kind of keep rolling up and rolling up and rolling up and getting bigger and bigger and bigger. But community has its downsides, and you're never sure, is it the best worst thing or the worst best thing, especially in those days. We got started in 2006, 2007. There were no real community standards. There weren't community tools. We had open chat and a lot of things going on, and we were sort of figuring everything out on the fly of how do we manage this community. And I think that's one thing that was like a little bit different from us versus some other sites that had community. So we were actually from the start pretty committed to moderating. That first year, I was so stressed by the chat and the things that were being said and how do we keep this. It started off so great. As we grew, how could we keep it positive? So we home rolled a ton of moderation tools that were all built. Jim actually built a lot of them. After he wasn't allowed to touch code that was like hitting the full site anymore. He still got to make admin tools like this. And I did things like I built a model that predicted, the sort of measured like positive community interaction versus negative interaction called GPR, pulling in chat logs and lots of other things. So we were there's much better versions of these tools now out there, but it was something that we, I think, did a lot with early. And one thing that even with the best, moderated community, you still things still happen. And one thing I sort of realized over time, we had an interesting moment kind of around the time of Gamergate, where we were starting to see just this really vicious harassment of women online. And I think Jim asked me if I got any of that, and I was like, well, I get a little, but you get these same messages too from players. And he's like, I don't get any harassing messages. So I was like, oh, that's interesting. So I did a comparison and took a look at the messages that Jim and I each got on Kongragate from players over time. And the interesting thing was that over time, they were really similar. I think it was like, 3,500 messages for each of us over 6 or 7 years. And I looked at them for harassment, and I was getting way more harassing messages than Jim, about 4 times as many. And the ones that I was getting were worse. They were very much more likely to be sexual. And interestingly, they were really obsessed with me and Jim having some sort of incestuous relationship. And that's just like an interesting phenomenon. It's something that I had taken for granted that he was getting this too, and we weren't. And so I wrote a blog post. This is still up on Kongragate. I think it got picked up by Polygon, going in the details, but showing, 2 founders in the same community, similar level of activity. I got different treatment than Jim did. But, through this, we kept building Kongragate, and we started, Jim started this very much from a vision of, I want to help other developers. It's been, I had this really rough experience with my first studio with Activision and controlling the rights and making a living. And that was always a big motivation for him and for all of us at Kongragate, was how can we help developers, small developers, succeed? And one of the things I think Jim and I are most proud of with Kongragate is that we really were able to do that and able to improve the Flash industry. When we got started, developers were not making very much money because games were stolen so much. They might get, a few $100s for a sponsorship, but Jim and I came in and were like, Kongragate, we're going to pay you dev share on all the advertising revenue. At the same time, Mochi came in with a company called Mochi, which was a ad product for Flash games. So even if your game got stolen, you could make revenue. And then another company called Flash Game License came around, and all 3 of us together sort of really, I think, changed the feeling of Flash game developers deserve to make money. So by 2009, 2010, the marketplace for Flash game developers had turned into something where the top game developers could make, $50,000 in a sponsorship for a game. We paid as much as $100,000 for one sponsorship, and it was totally worth it. We can't go into it as deep as we would like. There's just a huge history in the Flash industry. It's really the first indie scene, and the sort of source of a lot of innovation and a lot of change in the game industry. I highly recommend watching former Kongragate and former Armor Games employee John Cooney. He did an excellent GDC talk called The Flash Game Postmortem, which spends an hour talking very fast about this, and it's well worth it. So the other thing that was going on was, Kongragate started as ad supported, but we believed, particularly Jim had seen this in Asia, that free to play was something that was the future of the game industry and something that was coming. We did not really understand it. We knew that it was taking off in Asia. We'd seen MapleStory, but our real image of what a microtransaction game would be was something like Second Life in the US, and it was it was just something we were figuring out on the fly. But we were determined that that was the way that developers could make money that would really exceed ad revenue. So we built a platform and a currency called creds into Kongragate so that developers could charge directly in games. And then, we decided to fund some games to make games for that system. I call it the ignorant leading the inexperienced. We funded 6 games, including some games like Dino Wars and Remnants of Skystone. And we focused on synchronous multiplayer because we thought that was really important. People wanting to make free-to-play purchases, unique gameplay, and all, but we didn't understand monetization, and everything was tacked on because we were afraid of anything pay to win. But that meant that the monetization was pretty terrible. They were really good developers. Some of the Dino Wars developers went on to be part of the Threes team. Another team has had a long-term hit on iOS and Flash around the Papas series, but yeah, those games did nothing. So we launched the platform in November of 2008, and with our published titles, made like almost nothing for 8 or 9 months. And we were really kind of despairing that, we had bet on something and it was not working at all, and we were just going to be dependent on ad revenue. But the thing about an open platform is that you don't actually need to know everything. The games and the game developers themselves will teach you. So in September 2009, a very small team in Vancouver uploaded an indie MMO called Sacred Seasons, and suddenly our cred sales started to take off. And we were like, oh, MMOs. So Jim went out and talked to some Chinese browser developers, and they put a game on there called Heroes of Gaia, which again, oh, wow, that started taking off. And then an old coworker of Jim's had a slightly strange Facebook game called Dream World, which he put on. And then that also took off. And so now we had 3 games that worked. And that was, and from there we could start understanding, we could start analyzing what was working with these games, and start making recommendations to developers and helping them understand what to do. And that was the beginning, and it really took off. The next year, partly on the back of the growth we were seeing on creds, GameStop bought us. They did not buy us in stock. That was an all cash deal. We kept going. Conference talks and PR and other things kind of helped us keep fueling that. We didn't have, we were good size, but we weren't enormous. So one of the things we focused on was, okay, we have a lot of interesting data because we're a platform. So we're going to do public talks and help teach developers about free to play. And help them make better games, and that will be beneficial to us. And that strategy kind of continued to work.
Yes. So shall I tell this story, Emily?
Yes, you go for it.
Yeah. So we had a lot of interesting developers come to us with games, and then we got this email in December of 2009 from somebody named Notch at Mojang.com. And he said, oh, I have this game. It's not done yet. It's a Java game, but I think you can sort of put Java games in a web browser, which, by the way, was not a great experience. And we didn't quite get it, but actually Greg, who's in the Twitch chat right now, was like, I don't understand why this game is fun, but it's actually pretty fun. But unfortunately, it was like he was going to try to get people to go to his site, and it was going to be much better as a downloadable game than a browser game. So we said no to Minecraft. Yay us! And now my son plays it constantly, of course, and I play it with him. It's a great game. So anyway, we made mistakes, but that wasn't the reason that we went on to have the real thing that caused us some troubles. Was this guy who came out with this smartphone that was actually a good experience for playing games on, and had an open app store And if you ever played games on a flip phone, probably none of you did. But if you did, it was terrible. You could only play the games that Verizon pushed at you. And now here's an open platform for games, except it's not really an open platform. It's a platform owned and controlled by Apple. And it meant that somebody like Kongragate, we were a platform, right? So we did distribution. Well, Apple does distribution. We did monetization. Well, Apple does monetization. And we did community. And some companies try to do community as their own, like a sort of side business, a business in and of itself, but it's really just not a business by itself. So we're like, well, we got to figure out a way that we can be the platform and have our own games that are like an alternative to the App Store. So we tried to do that. There's some screenshots of that on the next slide, I think. It's called Kongragate Arcade, and it was literally like Flash games on a phone, which was still possible back then. We also tried doing a like sort of a whole gaming store or gaming integration for Verizon's phones, but they pulled the plug on that. So we basically realized like, well, in the mobile world, we can't be a games platform. We have to be something else. And, you know, I couldn't figure that out. But we did start to see that, you know, we were really helping developers on the web, particularly Emily and Greg, who's in the chat, and some of our other employees were like giving developers real tips and real data and a script on here's how your game can, you got a fun game, here's how it can retain people and make money. And we started to realize, I think this was really Emily, that mobile developers needed that too. So I will, at this point, let Emily tell that story.
Yeah. And, you know, Jim and I went to GameStop and sort of pitched them on letting us do publishing.
We didn't mention that we'd gotten bought by GameStop at this point. Yeah. We'd gotten bought by GameStop because we were, we had like a few $100,000 in the bank, which was enough to last us a few months. And we were like break even, but if we had a few bad months, we could be out of business. And and we realized like, oh, we don't know how to do mobile, and mobile is about to crush the world. So maybe time to sell, which we did, and was actually, well, yeah.
I was gonna say, GameStop also offered us a lot of money.
GameStop did offer us a lot of money.
More than we were really worth at the time, but we were confident, and we grew into what they paid for us, in part because of publishing. Yeah. So as Jim said, we started Kongragate to help developers, small developers, distribute and monetize their games. We could do that on mobile as a publisher, concentrating particularly on, talking to the app stores, helping them get features, having, a robust analytics system, knowing how to optimize ads, helping them with live operations and how to, not just launch a game, but keep it going for the long term. Over 5 or 6 years, and Kongragate publishing is ongoing, but I'm just going to talk about the period that I was still there. We published, I think, close to 60 games, and drove more than 200 million installs for third-party developers through a mix of marketing and user acquisition, virality, et cetera. And through this period, through 2014, web was continuing to grow. I think web revenue peaked around 2014, maybe dropping a little bit in 2015, but mobile publishing very, very quickly eclipsed the web revenue. I think by 2016, it was 75% of the revenue, and then just kept growing from there. This was the point where, Jim really loved building platforms, and publishing was a business that was not as interesting to him because it was much more sort of marketing and kind of data driven, and that was my background. And so that was the point where we sort of switched roles, and I took over as CEO, and Jim was CTO for a while, but then ended up leaving while I concentrated on this. And then you went on to do other things.
Yeah, so here's what I'm doing right now, and I'll get to that. I also traveled for a while and started a nonprofit trying to fight money in politics, and had a good time with my kids and mountain biked. But then just after COVID hit. Well, first off, Emily left Kongragate, which meant I could now steal the really good employees who were still at Kongragate like 9 years after we got acquired by GameStop, which usually people don't stick around tech companies that long after they, get paid for their options and all that. But I think it's a testament to the culture that happened at Kongragate among, some passionate developers and, Emily's leadership that made people stick around. So anyway, I couldn't steal those people from Emily while she was still working there. But when she was gone, it's like open season. So the new company is Bash, and it's there's 6 of us, and it's literally all 6 of us are former Kongragate. And so Bash is trying to basically like fight Zoom fatigue by integrating fun stuff. So you can spam people with GIFs, you can play games. The games are tightly integrated, you can play music, etc. And the games are really like tightly integrated with the video. So this game is nothing, amazing. It's, Pictionary. There's lots of places to pick Pictionary online, but the integration with the chat is really smooth. It's really easy. We were doing about 1 game a month, and we're doing them all internally right now. Next one is going to be Werewolf, then probably a pub trivia style game, and we're going to keep doing them. I miss having a platform. I miss having other developers bring us creative games. At some point, we probably will open up Bash to third parties, and if you have ideas for games that would work really well for video, I would love you to hit me up. There might be, a partnership we could do, or internships or something like that. So anyway, I'm looking for creative developers because right now we're doing it all ourselves. But it's a lot more fun than sitting on a Zoom. No offense to everybody who's doing it here, but if you want to socialize with friends, family, bond with your coworkers, we actually also can do very large events. We've done 100+ person events by splitting people up into rooms. So anyway, try it out, bash.video, see what you think, and hit me up.
Yeah. And as for me, I by 2019, I've been at Kongragate 13 years, including 9 years after being acquired. We sold Kongragate again to get it out of GameStop and went to MTG. But I was really missing those early years of Kongragate, those early years of being a small team, building something. But Jim's passionate about platforms. I'd actually really just fallen in love with games and making games. And, in 2006, the idea of me making a game I never would have occurred to me that was something that I could do. But, building a platform that had more than 100,000 games and then running a publisher, I over time built that confidence that, yes, actually I can start a studio and I want to make games for myself. The part of it is this sort of feeling that grew over time, Gamergate and other things sort of, I think, radicalized me a little bit on as a feminist, and also feeling, looking around the industry that, I'm a classic casual games player. I had Bejeweled on my flip phone. I played Pogo when Jim worked there. I love, puzzle games and match threes, etc. But just a feeling that the industry doesn't necessarily give that audience that I am, the respect that it deserves. And so I just really had a feeling that there was an opportunity there to start a studio focused on that audience, by people who are that audience, who really love the games and want to build, deep, innovative, great games. So I decided to start a studio. I got a friend of mine, Shelby Maladina, who's a great designer and producer, to come along as my co-founder. And that was in the fall of 2019. And we have raised investment rounds. We've got a prototype we're not sharing yet. A little more than a prototype, and we're building up the team. So we're hiring right now. If you can check out our website to see what we're doing there. So yeah, that's it. You can ask us anything at this point. You can also, Jim's got his email up there, or you can get us on Twitter. This is a the sort of most glamorous picture I had of the two of us on our computer. It's from the wedding of a very longtime Kongragate employee who now works at Bash and worked with me in the catalog industry before. So shout out to Teresa Chen and all the great and wonderful people that we got to work with at Kongragate. We didn't tell you all their names, but there are so many people who contributed so much, and we were lucky to get to work with.
Yeah, well, our Greg, who was our first or second employee, I forget. First employee is in the Twitch chat, so say hi to Greg Loire1, I think. Yeah. He was Emily. Put an ad on Craigslist saying, hey, write an essay about your favorite game and why it's your favorite. And I forget how many we got, but Greg's was like kind of we got a lot, but Greg's was a masterpiece. And it turns out hiring somebody who's passionate about games and can write is a really good recipe for somebody who can create great achievements and can go onto new grounds and convince indie developers to come put their games on a site they never heard of. So thank you very much to Greg.
You're still muted.
That is muted. The
now I'm not though.
We proved Zoom for real.
yeah, exactly. That was great. I knew it was going to be great because we talked about it beforehand, but it was even better than I thought it was going to be. I love the details that you went into. The chat has been going crazy for it. Jim, I saw you diving into the chat and responding to people, which is appreciated and great. That was a lot of fun. I've got a ton of questions and notes that I've compiled, but I'm also going to ask Logan to pull in some more questions as we go. I'm going to start at the beginning, though. Some things that sort of jumped out to me is things I wanted to know more about and sort of follow up. So one of the things, Emily, you said that you truly became a believer in sexism when you experienced pitching to VCs. Could you go? I mean, I guess. However comfortable you are talking about that, I don't know if you want to name names, but do you want to talk a little bit about what that experience is like and why it sort of drove that home for you?
Yeah, sexism was something that I did believe existed. Like I knew my mother sort of going through getting a PhD and becoming a professor had experienced a lot of it in the 70s and 80s. But, coming from college and then going into book publishing and then catalogs, I worked in environments that were, at least 50-50 women and often, 70% female. I usually worked for a VP that was female, and I'm sort of a kind of assertive person and really never felt any. So I thought it was something that was historical. And then we started Kongragate. And, the first seed round pitching, it wasn't too noticeable because, to be honest, VCs kind of treat everybody a little bit shitty. So it was hard to distinguish that the way they were treating Jim and the way they were treating me. But the second, when we raised our main investment round, we were a hot deal. Reed sort of said, I'm going to hand select 5 or 6 firms that get to talk to you, and you'll just go in and pitch. And it was almost sort of assumed that we would get term sheets from everybody. And so they were wooing us as much as the reverse. And then it was very noticeable when they were completely sucking up to Jim and acting like I wasn't in the room. And it was really startling. And there was one VC. This is actually a little bit later, but I was pitching, and Jim was in the room, and the guy kept asking every single question to Jim, and I got mad and sort of talked over and kind of insisted that he engage with me on that. But the thing that really brought it home was on that round that we raised. A lot of them were rude to me or treated me like I wasn't there in person. Greylock was actually really nice, but they had 2 conditions on the investment. One was that I give up the COO title, and the other was that I give up my board seat. It was really hard. They had made by far the best offer, and I felt tremendous pressure for us to accept it. And they had been nice to me in person, but it also was clear that they didn't think that I should be there. But, Jim and I talked about it, and I agreed, like, the title doesn't matter, but I need to be in the room. So we came back with a compromise that I would be a board observer. Greylock agreed to that. And then very quickly in the board meetings, things turned around, and, they saw my value, and started treating me like a true co-founder. Later on, I asked for the CEO title back, and our partner said, and he meant this nicely, but it was a little oblivious. He said, we funded Jim. We thought you were a negative on the deal, but it's been a pleasant surprise. You turned out to be competent and smart.
Well, he told me that at the time too.
Oh, yeah.
That he thought you were a liability. I just, I couldn't believe
tell
it.
me.
And I didn't tell you because it didn't seem like a useful thing for you to know.
Yeah. But I could tell. And they were wrong. And the funny thing is that, but our relationship after that point was good. And I'm still friends with Greylock. I've emailed with them in the last in the last year. In the last month even. And that's something that the positive story is both that I sort of we pushed through it and got through it. And then I think the industry has gotten a little bit better. And for Double Loop, we've now, raised quite a bit of money from people who very much want to invest in my company and would never think that I was a liability. In fact, doing it because of that. So, it was pretty unpleasant at the time. And I was lucky to have co-founder supportive as Jim, who never doubted that I was good. But it was a rough time.
I would like to think things have changed for all women, but sadly, it does not seem like that is the case. But it seems like at least you have gotten beyond that. That your reputation is very solid now. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a mixed thing, but it certainly is. It is better, and I have a lot of friends who are women starting studios, and we support each other. And back in 2006, I was very alone as a woman in games, and now I don't feel alone at all.
That's great. So yeah, I hope forward. Hopefully, obviously, there's still a long way to go on those things, but it's great, that someone like you is able to open the door for other people as well, and hopefully change a lot of people's minds about women in general. So one thing that struck out to me about sort of your early days, like early like kids days, is that Jim was a spender and you were a saver. Did that persist into your Kongragate days where Jim was like, let's buy this thing, you're like, maybe we should wait? Was that like a dynamic that lasted?
Yep, which is why I had like pretty full control over the finances.
Yeah. I mean, I'd say Kongragate would not have gotten founded without me, and it would have not have lasted more than a few years without Emily. So it was very, it was a very good partnership in that way.
Yeah, that's great that your sort of childhood dynamic ended up being the thing that made your adult collaboration so successsul. Question for
it's
you.
Also interesting, like if people see the two co-founders of the company fighting in a meeting, they get more freaked out. They normally get pretty nervous, but if people see a brother and sister fighting, they're like, well, they've been doing this for a long time, it's probably fine, right? So we were able to, the great thing about having a co-founder that you really trust is that it makes it much, much more efficient to make tough decisions. And there's nobody that you trust more than your sibling, hopefully.
We had, I would say we had 30 years of practice fighting and resolving things. And resolving conflict is, I think, one of the most important things you do as founders.
Yeah.
That's a really great lesson, I think, for all the people in the audience who are thinking about starting their own companies, is thinking about how, not like, are you going to fight, because you're going to fight, but how are you going to get through it? And I think it's great that you two had the dynamic to be able to get through that. I just ask more about the Leroy Jenkins, just have that pop in there, and not. I need more of that story. Can you give me a little bit more background on how that intertwined with Kongregate's history?
Yeah, people have a lot of good questions in the Twitch chat too, so we should dive into those. But
totally.
yeah, so this guy named Ben Vincent, I hired him at Electronic Arts in 2003 at Pogo, and he was an amazing programmer, and he was also a super hardcore World of Warcraft player, and was the head of a game called clan called Pals for Life, which he, his fellow clan member was Anthony, who would be known in the future as Leroy Jenkins, and so they created a piece of machinima, right? So in-game fiction, right? People thought that that was a real thing that they had somehow recorded, but they were shocked that anybody ever believed it was real. But if you've never seen it, go Google Leroy Jenkins. It's an awesome game. He's actually thinking about selling it as an NFT now, the original cut.
That'll do well, I think.
Maybe that'll put his kids through college. But
wow.
They is a really great guy and my co-founder and lifelong friend at this point, or 18 years. So very creative person, and shows that programmers. He just does all kinds of creative stuff.
The chat is very against NFT, for the record. We have a very
anti-NFT. It's purely a land grab. He's like, this is ridiculous, but maybe I can make some money. And
I mean, people said the same thing about virtual currencies and blockchain and Bitcoin and stuff, and maybe it is still
on all that stuff.
Maybe it is, but maybe it's not. Who can say? So I'm going to go to some questions that Logan has passed on to me from the chat now. Actually, I know you've been following along in the chat too, Jim. So if you want to just bring in some of the ones that you've seen that you think are good as well. But the first question I'm going to ask kid that came up in the chat is, if there was a Flash era game that you could resurrect today, what would you choose?
Em?
Well, my complete go-to, it is Bloons Tower Defense 5, but I don't need to resurrect it because I've been playing it on mobile for a year. I tried Bloons Tower Defense 6 and then just reverted like a creature of habit. So that would be there. An actual Flash game that never got a mobile, it has to be You Have to Burn the Rope.
That's conceptual game. Go play it. Download you can if you want to play Flash games, you can download browser plugins to do it now, so it's worth doing it, or Chrome extensions. If I had to pick one, my single favorite, there are a lot of good ones, but Continuity is a game I've never seen done on mobile. So Continuity is a side-scrolling platformer, but you can move around the different rooms. So you go from one room to another through doors. And as you build out the map, you can drag one room to be, this one was above me, but now I'm going to put it underneath me so I can reach this lever to blah, blah, blah. So just like one of these that's the great thing about Flash games. And I think much more so than a mobile game is you could just throw something together and, a really creative idea like that could become a game, I think, much more quickly than even like Unity or whatever, all these more heavyweight engines let you do. So there's a million good ones that never made it to mobile. So if you're looking for ideas for something to build, it's digging around in the top rated games on Kongragate and Newgrounds and so forth. There's tons of stuff there that hasn't been developed into a more full feature idea.
What is your current take on the current state of browser games? Obviously, Flash is now dead. There's a lot of like different plugins, Unity games. What do you feel like? How do you feel about the current state and the future of Flash games? Sorry, not Flash games, web-based games, browser games. Yes.
I mean, there's still never been anything as sort of effective and simple as Flash. Like it's still much more work to have something work in browser than it used to be. And it works and you can make it work, but that, that total simplicity is gone. But I think, anything that's instant has, has appeal. Like browser has a place in the ecosystem, and we're very much at Double Loop. We're hoping to make our games cross-platform, but it's mobile first. It's mobile first, browser second, maybe third after PC, but we'll see.
And itch exists and has good games on it, right? So, but I think in terms of being kind of like the creative center of the industry, the way Flash was, 10 years ago, I don't think that's coming back. Yeah. But I mean, part of it too, though, is like if you look at in 2009, there were not a lot of whole indie distribution platforms, right? So part of that is a good thing that there are now a lot more options, right? There's console download, there's Steam, and I still wish Steam, all these things, the app stores and Steam and the console downloads are still very gated, and they could be a lot more indie friendly. They're not Newgrounds in terms of accessibility, but they exist, and they just did not exist when Flash games were coming up. So it's a good thing and a bad thing.
And Jim is still making browser games.
I am making browser games.
That's true. Yeah. This is, if you wanted to do a little, I have played those games, just to give a quick plug for, not that this is what it's all about, but, I have played Bash games, and for my nonprofit, we actually do our game night. We're actually having one this tonight, a week from tonight, and we're doing it in Bash. So yeah, I would recommend anyone in the audience to check out bash.video. There's a lot of cool stuff. I'm a big fan of Psychic Friends in particular. That game is a lot of fun. So definitely check that out.
Yeah, and I would love feedback from creative, young and old designers and enthusiasts who I can tell we have in the Twitch based on the fact that the old games that people remember. So you've got my email address. So play the games. Let me know what you like. Let me know what you should do next.
I'm going to ask a question, one of my questions now, because I'm kind of dying to know the answer. So Emily, you kind of hinted at a game that you're working on now. Just whatever you're comfortable sharing. I want to know as much as you are willing to tell us about it without, I know it's still sort of not public consumption. So what are you willing to tell us about what you're working on right now?
Yeah, it's a little hard. I'd love to be able to talk about it, but there is so much cloning in mobile, and we have
so it's mobile.
It is mobile. It's mobile. It's mobile first. It is a hybrid puzzle game with a very deep meta game, and we're going to be building working towards sort of fresh takes on community and social. That's more cooperative within within casual games and for a casual game audience.
That sounds very exciting. When do you think you'll be able to talk about more details about the game more publicly? I won't push you on release dates or anything, but just when can we expect more information?
Basically, once it's in soft launch, we can talk. Once it's at the point where if you set your store to the right place or use a VPN to see it, then we might as well talk about it. But probably not until then. But we're hoping to get to soft launch sometime this year.
Great. Okay, I'm looking forward to that. Question from the chat: where did the idea and inspiration for the company name and logo for Kongragate come from?
So we spent a lot of time thinking about names, and at that point in 2006, it really seemed important to own the .com domain for whatever we chose as our name. Bash, obviously, we didn't do that, and it seemed like having a one-word name that people can pronounce. So Kongragate, the idea was just this is a community, right? This is people coming together, so they are congregating, and we'll put a K on it because we can get that domain, and it feels sort of gamey, I guess. This is the era where Flickr dropped the E to, as the creative spellings were the norm. And I like the name, and unfortunately, it's just hard if somebody tells you at school to go play Kongragate. It's by the time you get home, you don't remember it. So all our like core players always refer to us as Kong, and we tried to buy the Kong.com domain, but a realtor named Dolores Kong wanted, I think, $700,000 for it, so we didn't buy her.
Yeah. Well, I think our first thought, like at first she wanted like 5 million or something.
Oh yeah, I talked her down to
700K.
Yeah.
But yeah, by the time I joined, Jim already was calling it Kongragate. So like very quickly it was Kongragate. But we both thought it's too long, it's too hard to spell. So we spent like literally up to the last day before we launched trying to come up with another one. And it was just like this endless hobby. And this is the saver versus spender thing, was like Jim would like start worrying about it at night, and I would wake up and find like $500 worth of charges on the credit card because he'd reserved
This is why you were in charge of the finances.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then I would fuss at him, but then the funny thing was is that later on, one of them was bullpig.com, and somebody came and wanted that and paid us $2,000 for it. So like,
so they all paid off. I forgot that.
It all paid off, and Jim, as he deserved to, said, pushed it in my face that I had given him such a hard time about buying all these random domains.
So actually they also asked about the logo, and the logo is an interesting story. So the logo, if anybody's played a game called Super Meat Boy, the developer, designer of that is a guy named Edward McMillan, who had early games. What's that?
Edmund.
Oh, shit. Edmund. Oh, sorry, Edmund. I haven't seen you in 15 years. So, but yeah, he did it for free. He's just like, Ants Kongragate. No, we paid him?
Oh yeah, we totally paid him.
Okay, yeah. That's good.
Again, why she's the money.
I think it was his, okay, sorry. Emily has much better memory than I do. But I think it was his concept though, right? Like he said.
So this was back before, like, because Flash developers were really, really not making any money, and he was making lots of games. But so he was sort of hitting me up on AIM for contract work, like honestly once a week. And I was like, okay, you could do us we need a pre-screen thing. You want to do it for us? And then he sent us like, I shared it he shared it on the original drawings on Twitter like a year or two ago, of all these different concepts of animals that congregate. So there's like some, like, because it's Edmund, like there's a group of maggots congregating. And then...
do you have these images somewhere? Is there any way can we share those?
It would take me a while to find it, because it was in my Kongragate email, but it's out there somewhere. And there were bumblebees, and then there was the ants, and then there was just like one sketch of an ant against the hill that was just super strong. And we talked about it a little bit, because like ants can be, ants, if you live in California, like ants will come in and like swarm your cereal sometimes. So it wasn't like completely the best association. But the image was so cool, we just couldn't resist.
So there's a lot of comments in the chat right now about Smatch, and whether one of you will
Smatch is
revive it.
Smatch basically takes the idea of like, okay, match 3 games, they're great, but what if you had a match 1 game? I believe that was the concept. So it's an amusing game.
That was
I believe by Lord Smatchington.
Yes, a lot of tequila was consumed in the making of that game.
There's a question in the chat about them, just on the sci-fi movie about giant ants. It was that in no way played a part in the Kongragate logo. No, okay, just checking.
In my opinion, Edmund would be able to answer that question. That's not a movie I've seen.
Emily, you mentioned, like still teaching yourself SQL, and like, you had this pretty broad background of all these different things that you were working on before you came to Kongragate. Do you still do programming at all? And are you still writing SQL queries? Is any of that? I mean, obviously that's probably not the majority of your day, but I'm just curious if any of the technical stuff is something you still participate in.
Yeah, I don't do it well, but I wrote a SQL query today. So
there you go. All right.
And actually, that's something, data stuff and was something that I really enjoy. And part of the fun of being back to a smaller company is that actually I have some time to work on it, and it's useful to have me work on it. I think both Jim and I had the problem that we like doing these things, but if you're the CEO, like, you're not supposed to do it, and also you get kind of bad at it, and the professional paid employees don't really want you doing it anymore, but you still want to do it, and they don't want to say no to the CEO. So but yeah, we're both back to smaller companies where we can write well, hopefully Jim's code is better than mine. Mine's pretty terrible now.
No, but they let me do shit work sometimes.
I remember an old boss of mine once said programming is a young person's game, and at the time I was a young person, so I didn't really understand what they were saying, but now I'm starting to get it. I'm starting to see.
I think there's plenty of good. I think the thing as you get older is that it gets harder to learn new programming paradigms. I mean, not impossible, but it takes more effort, but I don't think you really get worse at the ones that you already know. That's my experience from talking to a lot of older programmers. And ageism is very real, very, very real in Silicon Valley. And, it is less irrational than sexism, I have to say, unfortunately. Like, it's, if you say, okay, I want to get a new programmer who's going to be able to learn the stupid new JavaScript framework of every 3 years of whatever's hot, somebody who's 60 probably doesn't give a shit. And more than that, no, a lot of them give a shit, but it does get harder to learn new things. That's a neurological fact. So wisdom has to replace speed of learning.
Yeah, I definitely feel like that 12th framework is is less fun to learn than the second one.
Yeah.
But what I would say is, like, I write shitty code. I don't do it very often, but I understand what's hard for databases and what's slow for databases. And that's been really useful. Kind of, almost every scaling problem we had at Kongragate was a database problem. So even though I didn't know much about, like, the rest of the site, I understood the conversations about the part that was usually breaking. And that's something that I've always been grateful that I already knew enough about before we started.
Yeah, I think one thing too is that while I'm a terrible coder, I am good at recruiting and nurturing and keeping developers happy. So Kongragate had elite developers, and I think this is not because I'm amazing, but I think there's actually a Harvard Business Review study that says they looked at all these factors of how are people, they measure, are you satisfied with your boss? And they did a big survey, and they've looked at all the correlated factors. And the single biggest correlation with liking your boss is, does my boss know how to do my job? Because there's nothing that makes you more empathetic and knowledgeable about what you're making people do than having some intuition about what it takes to do, even if they're hopefully way better at you than you at it. So, which is funny that it's coming from a business school, which is where you go to not learn any business, but just learn how to manage people in a generic way. And so they wrote an article saying that's not at all useful. But anyway, just
not at all, but not not the most important thing.
I would not. I apologize to anybody who has a business degree, but I would say there are better things to learn than
anyone who's watching from business. Stern. We value your contributions, and business school is great. So Jim, you passed on working on or developing Tower of Goo into World of Goo. You both passed on purchasing Minecraft for pennies on the dollar.
It wasn't for sale. He just wanted to put it on Kongragate.
Okay.
So
we passed on hosting Minecraft.
Okay.
Hosting an inferior web version of Minecraft as well.
Sure. Okay. Fair. Any other big regrets? Any other pitfalls that you fell into that you would like to share now with our audience, or advice you can give to people about things that maybe you were a little short-sighted on, or had the wrong vision on, or that sort of thing?
Personally, my biggest regret was part of the initial plan from the start of Kongragate was, ad revenue first, then free to play, but we also wanted to support, downloadable premium games for sale. And, you know, we meant to do like right around like 2011, 2012, we were sort of looking at that and decided essentially not to do it for reasons related to mobile and GameStop and other things. And I always regretted that we, you know, watching the rise of Steam and Itch, like we were in a great position to help the Flash game devs make that transition that we didn't really know was coming, and we missed it. That's probably my single biggest Kongragate regret.
Yeah, I mean, the flip side of that though is one of the other things I learned is that focus is really, really important. And we were trying to do things like Kongai in the early years, like develop our own game, and it was a huge distraction. And so part of the reason we didn't do a downloadable store is because like this is going to be a distraction and we think mobile is more important. So, you know, it's really, really hard to know. It's like take the right opportunities, but don't take the wrong ones. And, you know, I think you can't second guess yourself too much, right? Like when to focus on focus and when to try a new idea is just like, it's a really hard thing. So
yeah. We did well on mobile, and we might have it's one of these sort of like hindsights. You could see the opportunity we had, but as Jim says, we were totally right that we needed to focus. And moving flat, you know, a free site to paying was going to be really challenging. So that was our other fear, and that was well founded too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think luck is a part of all success, and obviously you had some good fortune and some bad fortune.
Yeah, I mean, I think,
but you had a lot of success.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, we started on second base. You know, we were born into an upper middle class family and got good educations, and we had an Apple II when I was 11, and you know, I've programmed games in AppleSoft Basic, and you know, we had the financial resources to start, and we happened to say, oh, it's YouTube for games. Of course, it's ironically that we're on Twitch right now, which is you know, maybe the bigger opportunity in YouTube for games. But our timing was good, and we surrounded ourselves with good people. So I feel very fortunate and happy that I, you know, am now in a position where I can do it again. And I think probably my biggest contribution to the game industry was bringing Emily into it. So I'm so proud of that.
I feel like I do it. Go ahead, Emily.
I agree, but yeah.
I kind of want to end on that. That kind of is like too perfect. So I think maybe I will. I mean, yeah. So I do want to say that that was a great talk, and the Q&A was just as good. We really appreciate your time. You know, we are definitely excited about your new ventures, and probably have lots of students who are interested in doing partnerships and internships and job opportunities and openings that are in our alumni communities as well. So please don't be shy with those. Pass those on to myself and the admins at the Game Center, and we will make sure that those get to our students so that we can, and our alumni, so that we can build more connections between the great work you're doing and our department. Thank you so much. And thank you to the admins and staff who helped make this talk possible. So great job, everybody. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much, Matt. And
thank you.
Yeah, thanks to everybody. Shut up. All right.
Yeah.
Bye.
Night, everybody.